and that is associated with the geometrical property of squared well. It tells you because if you flip the square like this, it's still the same thing. And I asked you to plot these wave functions, which are like these contour plots, which I hope you have done. And if you do the plots, you will see the partners, which are like these switch partners, NMMN, NXNY or NYNX, whatever you call it. They are connected by a geometric transformation. If you plot them, you will see that they are connected. But there is another kind of degeneracy, which is coming because these pairs are, the square of these numbers are equal, then the energy is equal, and that they are also same, and that is not a, there is no geometric property or there is no simple transformation that connects them. So they are called accidental degeneracies. And one example is this: if you plot 8118 and 4774, you will see that you can go from one to another by a transformation. But if you plot 18 and 47, they have same energy, then there is no simple transformation. So this is one key point. And if the object is rectangular, then of course the condition is more strict and hard to satisfy. So you have to satisfy some condition like this, and so on. So then we talked about all these possibilities that exist in squared well, and then I just outlined the problem in the cubic well, and then I discussed the outline of the simple harmonic oscillator in 2D problem, where basically I said that you have a simple harmonic oscillator and isotropic, which means the omega is same in x and y, and I write it as I half a omega square x square plus y square. It's a simple separation of variable is applicable. And then I argued that I didn't solve the fully, but I argued what the solution should look like, and I wanted you to check that. So let's start from here, and notice that this thing, and then we discussed that one note of the thing here is that apart from the paired symmetry, which means if you flip-flop nx and y, so this is here we are plotting the energy levels, and I see that if nx and y 0, it's the ground state, and then the first state has two-fold degeneracy, which is 0, 1, 1, 0, and second level has three-fold degeneracy, 2, 0, 1, 1, and 0, 2. And we can see that they are, say, 2, 0 and 0, 2 are connected to each other, and 1, 1 is an accidental degeneracy. And one can figure out these numbers by doing this mathematical problem of partitions. It's a famous problem that's studied by Ramanujan in number theory. And the problem is nothing but how many ways you can add two numbers, two different numbers, such that you get the same integers. So, or other way, how many ways, if you're given an integer, how many ways you can partition them? How many different ways you can partition them in two equal part or n equal part, whatever, all this extension of that problem. And if you plot this, even if you just do it without knowing the theorem, if you just plot this, you will see that the degeneracy of the nth level is n plus 1 in this problem. And this is a very profound problem. Let me tell you a little bit side talk about this problem. So it turns out that when you describe electron in a two-dimensional plane, in the presence of a magnetic field that is perpendicular to that plane. So you will learn more details about how to deal with magnetic field in next semester in the quantum mechanics 2. But let me just tell you, you can, if you do that problem, you can write the problem in this form, in a potential of this form by some transformation. And therefore, this problem has this kind of a degenerate energy states. Electrons have a degenerate energy state. And that the consequence of that is very profound. It means you are saying that there are infinitely many electrons. You can show that infinitely many electrons can come in the same level. I mean, same level means same energy level, but different states. And then you have to treat such a electron, such a set of electrons which are the same energy as a fluid. So this thing is called an electron liquid, and they're extremely correlated because they are all at same level. So you have to write down the wave function as a superposition of them, and then there is no suitable basis where you can decompose them. So this kind of phenomena is macroscopic scale of electron being correlated to each other is one of the profound problem of quantum mechanics. And this leads to a very interesting thing called quantum Hall effect. So there was two Nobel Prizes on these. One is 1984 and 1998. 98 was fractional quantum Hall effect. 94 was integer quantum Hall effect. And integer quantum Hall effect can be understood from this problem. And it turns out that such a system can have some non-trivial topology, and also the degeneracy leads to very interesting physics in that system. So this is just a motivation that why such a simple problem is so interesting, and how such a simple problem can be so interesting. But you will learn the technical details of this problem in the next semester. Even if you may not learn the actual problem, but you will know all the tools that is required to study the problem. Which means particle, if you have an electron in a two-dimension, and if you turn on a magnetic field B, this problem can be mapped to a 2D simple harmonic oscillator problem. And this degeneracy controls the physics of that kind of systems. Okay, so this was what we discussed last time. Now let's move on to discuss this problem in a slightly different way. So we know this already from our studies in classical mechanics and everywhere, that if a problem has a particular symmetry, then it makes sense to move in a coordinate or move in set of variables where this symmetry is manifested. Okay. So in this problem, for example, has a cylindrical symmetry. So cylindrical symmetry. So I'm now still doing 2D simple harmonic oscillator. This problem has a cylindrical symmetry because I can write the wave, these things like that. So it is like you are rotating this object in like that, and this axis is Vxy. So X is y. If it is an isotropic, then it has this symmetry. So it makes sense to go in a cylindrical coordinate where the problem is easier to express and the symmetry is manifested. That is the main word. So cylindrical coordinate where the symmetry is manifested. You will see this point again and again. So you always have, there are a lot of choices in this quantum mechanics problem, or any problem you have a lot of choices. How will you describe and how will you set up the problem? And you will see that it's always best to do it in this symmetry manifested way. You must have seen this in electrodynamics. You have learned this gauge, like gauge choice. There is always, when you do electrodynamics problem, the gauge field you can choose, and you can choose it in a way such that, of course, the curl of that is giving you the magnetic field and all these structures are there. But the choice depends on the geometry of the problem or the symmetry of the problem. And that makes your life incredibly easier. Otherwise, it can become very hard. I mean, if you try to solve a complicated 3D problem in Cartesian coordinate where it has a manifestly a clear symmetry in some other coordinate, then your life is very difficult in that coordinate. So that is why we are going to use this coordinate, cylindrical coordinate of rho and phi, where rho is the distance of a point from the origin, the horizontal radial distance, and phi is the angle it makes with some axis, let's say some chosen axis. Okay. So then the potential will become very simple. It become radial. There is no angle dependence because of the isotropy, and we'll see that how one can solve this. Because now it's a very simple problem. Just a moment. Yeah. So let's just write down some. Let's go in a little nonlinear way. Let's just write down some of the main solution and see that how the main solution means some lowest energy state solution, and let's see how the cylindrical symmetry is manifested there when I write it in this coordinate. Okay. So the potential has cylindrical symmetry. But if you notice that the way you have written your psi 1 0, but the states don't, because the states don't, right? Because when you have written the states in the Cartesian coordinate, you have written in this form, in the Cartesian form. Now in this Cartesian form, of course, the cylindrical symmetry is not manifested. So let's just rewrite it once more. So psi 1 0 in 2 xi. I'm just rewriting this solution. I'm just rewriting this solution for 1 0 and 0 1. I'm trying to show you that how can you recover the symmetry in a convenient way. So in 2 xi e to the power minus zeta square plus zeta square by 2 psi 0 1 is into eta square plus eta square. So this form is clearly not symmetric because one has zeta, another has zeta, and if you do any transformation, cylindrical transformation, it doesn't show that the potential has the symmetry. The wave function seems to doesn't have the symmetry. But we can always take a linear combination of them because we know that they are degenerate eigenstates. And then we can manifest the symmetry. So let's try to do that. Psi10 plus minus I psi01. Some combination. We want to get two wave functions because there are two. And then you get n2 rho C phi plus minus IS phi. And you get e to the power minus rho squared. Now I am going to the polar coordinate and I will get n2 rho e to the power plus minus I phi e to the power minus rho squared by 2. Now I can see this psi plus minus, which is nothing but a linear combination of the Cartesian solutions. And this is also a legal solution because we know that any linear combination of degenerate space is also a solution. This is manifestly cylindrically symmetric. So that gives you this point that if you go to a convenient choice, you will get all the symmetries and everything are manifested in a convenient choice of coordinate. And this is coming from the point because of the degeneracy you can do this. Because of the degeneracy you can do this kind of a thing. So what is this object then? So what is this physically? What does this represent? So this is a stationary state solution of the problem. Okay. So this is a complex stationary state solution with a position dependent angle. So if you try to interpret it in your Cartesian basis, you will know that this phi is an angle which depends on the position of the particle because phi is dependent on x and y. So you have a stationary state solution where you have an angle and that angle is dependent on position. So you can think it like as if there is you can visualize this object as if there is a particle that is moving like that, or particle is somewhere located like that, and the angle that the coordinate of the particle makes gives you a phase of the system. So gives you the phase of the system. And because of this picture, so here I will try to motivate you a little physically that where does angular momentum enter in this picture. And later you will learn it much more formally in a more rigorous way, that why this problem has an angular momentum and why angular momentum is a conserved quantity, etc. But let's try to intuitively build this picture. The picture is you have a two-dimensional harmonic oscillator, and now because of some variable transformation to manifest the symmetry, I landed on a picture of a particle where the coordinate. So let's define an angular momentum. Is there a question from someone? If there is a question, it's much better to talk about it because I am not looking at the screen all the time. Okay, at the screen where the question pops out. Okay. So let's define an angular momentum because we have visualized this particle object as a coordinate which is like that. So therefore it must have an angular momentum which is about this axis from my classical intuition. So I'm writing it in this way, and then I can go to the so it's basically x del y minus I h bar y del x. Now if I go to the polar coordinate, it becomes minus I h bar del phi. So now let's see how this wave function behaves under this phi, under this angular momentum. So this angular momentum will act on these wave functions. So notice that this wave function is an eigenfunction of the Hamiltonian, and I got it by doing a linear superposition of the Cartesian solutions, but these are also legal solutions. So if I calculate these, I'll get h bar psi minus. And that tells me this is basically, these two solutions are basically eigenfunction of the angular momentum with plus h bar and minus h bar eigenvalue. So in order to see this, we can also see this in a slightly different way. We can show that if there is a wave function, so let's say I don't know the wave function of the eigenvalue. Let's say I don't know the wave function of the of the angular momentum operator. Then how can I work out this structure? So I can work out it by rewriting I h bar del phi of phi Lz phi, and then the solution is nothing but e to the power I Lz phi by h bar. Now notice, since I have described this problem as a particle on a ring or particle on a circle, then it must satisfy this continuity. Continuity means the functions at the same point cannot be double value. So this point, and after 2 pi rotation, it's the same point again. So phi plus 2 phi must be phi. Okay. And that tells me my Lz must be, so if I do that, then the Lz must be mh bar, some integer. And the m is 0 plus minus 1 plus minus 2 and so on. So you know how to show this, right? If I just write a phi plus 2 pi or 2 pi m, any arbitrary integer m, then it must identify it with that, and then I should get the Lz to be like that. So if I ask a question, what is the eigenvector or eigenfunction of the Lz operator, it must have this quantized structure because of it being on a circle. Now, out of these solutions, many different solutions, psi plus minus is basically those two solutions, which is plus minus h. These two solutions. This is an alternate way to see that. But the full solution is, of course, has two different parts. So the full solution, I can rewrite the full solution as R, a rho part and a phi part. So this is the phi part which satisfies this. And the R part is, of course, some rho dependent part, which is n rho e to the power minus rho square by 2. So this is an alternate way to build up this solution without actually doing the full problem. So where I combine these two and get the solution for the ground state, and I show that this is made of two parts. One is from the angular momentum part, and this from the radial part. And the angular momentum part must be a phase with a discrete factor, and the discrete factor is basically tells you what is the angular momentum eigenvalues. And we physically interpret is visualize this problem as a particle that is moving on a ring effectively because of this representation in terms of the angular coordinates. Okay, is everything clear so far? I will make everything more rigorous, but I'm just making sure that this pictorial way of visualizing this problem is clear.
So the quantization of angular momentum, it came only because of the 2 pi
yes,
symmetry,
it
right?
came from the continuity. It came from the fact that at single valuedness, not continuity. It came from the fact that the phi must be same at the same point. Now we know on a circle, phi plus 2 pi m is same as phi. That's why it came.
So is this because of the symmetry of the problem?
Yes, of course. I mean, if this whole structure is the reason that you can go to this structure of the problem is because of the symmetry. But I have not yet made that point clear. I will make that point much more rigorous later. But right now I'm trying to tell you intuitively that look, if my problem has a symmetry, it has a structure like that. That it must have a coordinate which is phi-like. There is another quantity, and the wave function is the eigenfunction of that another object, which is Lz, and it has a quantized eigenvalue structure. So I'm just showing it as a phenomenological statement, not as a rigorous statement. But later I will show you, and you will realize this whole thing is a part of the structure you have already understood. Because the problem has a symmetry, that it has a conserved quantity according to Noether's theorem. That conserved quantity is Lz. That conserved quantity commute with the Hamiltonian. Because it commutes with the Hamiltonian, they have a common eigenvector, and this is the common eigenvector. Okay, this is the picture. Is everything clear so far?
And the psi plus minus works because of the degeneracy, right?
Yes. So I'm trying to show you that the earlier solution you have derived is not manifested. The cylindrical symmetry of the problem is not manifested in that solution. But if I take a suitable linear combination, then the cylindrical symmetry is manifested. This is equivalent to the statement, let's say two operator commute. If they commute and they have one of them has a degeneracy, then of course there are infinitely many combinations of solutions. But all of these combination may not be the correct eigenvector of the second solution, of the second operator, right? So a suitable choice will be the correct eigenvector. But the second operator in this case is identified with the symmetry of the problem. Okay? This is equivalent to that statement. Is it clear now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just building up this whole picture you already know in a informal manner, and then I'll make it rigorous. Okay. Now let's one more thing I want to add, just that now how do you do this formally? Now I did everything informally. Now let's do it a little more formally. So let's write down the full Hamiltonian in cylindrical coordinate. I hope everybody is in the same page about this. This picture is very important. That it's everything is fine, even if you have solved the problem in Cartesian coordinate and everything, it doesn't show the symmetry. To show the symmetry, you have to write it in a form where it is where the symmetry is more visible. And that form, it turns out that the form you landed on is the eigen solution of another operator, and that operator is basically this LZ operator. And this is consistent with this mutually commuting picture. I have not yet showed that this will commute and all, but you can work out that this HLJ is actually commuting operator. And that is why you have all these structures. Okay. Now let's do it a little more formally. Okay. You might wonder that why I'm not just telling you it in the other way. But the reason is it's not so easy to figure out those things a priori in a problem, right? When you do a research problem, for example, all these structures are not visible. You don't even know. People sometimes get this by getting this intuition. Oh no. If the classical picture is like a particle rotating, there must be an angular coordinate. And where is that angular momentum? How to find it? All this finding this structure is not so easy for a problem. Once you know it, now if you go to a textbook, you will see it is written in the other way. They will say, oh, it's a symmetry and it's a commuting operator and everything. So then everything falls in place and you are very happy. But it's not easy to do that for a problem when you don't know the structure of the problem. You just, let's say you solved it some coordinate, and that coordinate gives you some solution which is not manifested. The symmetry is not manifested. How do you know that there is a symmetry in the problem? In this problem, it might appear very trivial because you know that this problem has cylindrical symmetry. All I have to do, I have to find the wave function in a way such that it is manifested in cylindrical symmetry. But in some other problem, the symmetry might not be so simple. It might not be even geometric. Then there are very ununiform approach or unconventional approach to see that if you can find a solution and that solution is manifesting some symmetry, and then you try to see what is the operator which is corresponding to that symmetry. So that is the reason I'm trying to build it up this subject in this way. You might find it unconventional, but this is how actual work is done. Okay. So del rho. Del rho. Del phi 2. Okay. So this is basically how I can rewrite it. So you know these kind of things, right? You know that to do the calculus, if you know these two relations, you can work out. You can go from here to here, right? Are you familiar with this kind of simple calculus of
Yes.
how to change the variable and change the derivatives. Okay, very good. So this is the kinetic term actually. That is why I'm writing it as T. So basically the T is, now I can rewrite. So now notice this thing is nothing but Lz square. Lz square by 2m rho square. So I can rewrite this problem as 1 by rho del del rho rho del del rho plus Lz square by twice m rho square. So this, because the Lz is nothing but IH bar del del phi, I'm just rewriting this in terms of Lz. And we know that Lz is a constant of motion. Again, I'm telling it from the classical intuition. I have not said it yet rigorously. Because we know that we can map this problem, visualize this problem as a particle on a ring. So, wait. So now I want to do plus some V rho. This is how you will write the isotropic simple harmonic oscillator in 2D. Now notice this part is another V rho. Okay, so this is sometimes called a V effective rho. So you are, as if you are replacing the original problem. So original problem is a 2D problem. Okay, after variable transformation, this equation is like a 1D equation, right? There is only one variable rho, because you have packed all other complexity inside the Lz and declared Lz as a constant, and that you know because you know that this Lz eigenvectors have this structure and it will give you these eigenvalues. So now it becomes an effectively a new problem, which is a 1D problem, but the potential is replaced by the original potential plus Lz square by 2m rho square. So this is basically simple harmonic oscillator in 2D that is become an 1D problem. Note, I want isotropic. Without isotropic, 1D problem with additional potential Lz square by twice m rho square plus the original potential. Okay. Now let's try to again go back to the classical problem and see where does all this picture come from. So notice that the intuition I build up here is from the classical problem, where I visualize this as a particle on a ring. Okay, the particle on a ring at distance r. So if that happens, then the energy is half m r dot square plus r phi dot square plus v r. Okay. So this term is the simple radial kinetic term. This term is the centrifugal term, and this term is some potential. Let's say some central force type potential. So we know I can write this whole thing as half m r dot square plus Lz square twice m r square plus v r, where Lz is m r square y dot. Phi is basically some angle it makes with some reference. Now we know in the classical problem also from Noether's theorem, in this problem, that angular momentum is a conserved quantity. And that is because of the rotational invariance. So it's same as momentum for translation. That's the Noether theorem basically. And we know when that happens, the Poisson bracket of these two quantity is 0. And we can, as we have discussed earlier, we can always transport these classical relations to a quantum relation by saying h by Lz I1 by IH bar 0, and that is basically h Lz 0. So that is one simple way to know that why I expect this to be like that. And then of course I can show it rigorously that it is indeed like that. But before doing the calculation, my naive expectation is from the classical structure of the problem that this must be like that. Okay. Now, when this happens, we also know from our CSCO part that this then it must be so that the stationary state, which means the eigenstates of Hamiltonian, stationary states of H, can be labeled by LZ eigenvalues. Because they are mutually commuting operator, therefore it must be so that I can write the eigenvectors, eigenstates of the problem by the eigenvalues of the other one. So let's see that how it is done. We have already done this form, and it's a very simple check that how to do that. So my full problem is H, and my eigenstate is given by psi m rho phi, the two coordinates em psi m rho phi, and Lz, because they are commuting, and we also checked it in the other way, the Lz must be also have a some rho m rho phi m h bar m rho phi, and the psi m must have two parts. O n is the normalization, some r rho, sorry, phi, and this part is basically e to the power I, where m can go from all this. So check this. So first check this structure, and then also check that psi plus minus n rho e to the power. This is a very easy check. So these two wave functions are this something that just the one we constructed by adding and subtracting the Cartesian solutions. These two wave functions are angular momentum eigenstate, and they are also energy eigenstates with these two different energies. Now there is one more thing which I will mention, but I will not do it here, and I will do it actually in the next class in the next week for some in a more broader context. But I want you to try this thing also. Try to do a ladder operator description of that, and you will find the same thing. So this example is worked out in Cohen-Tannoudji 2D SHO. So I will do that in detail for hydrogen atom problem. So that's why I'm not doing this one, because that is also a radial coordinate problem except in 3D. So if you do in 2D, you will see the following. This one, h bar omega n plus 1 into AC. Okay. So that will tell you that at each level, at the same level, this nx plus ny, so for example, nx plus 1 and nx minus 1, they are same level. And that will allow you to tell that you must be ax dagger and ay must be an invariant operator. Okay, something of this structure must be an invariant, because ax dagger will lift your 1x and ay will take you down from 1y. So this is the intuition. So notice that how I'm mixing always some intuition in my partial structure of the solution, and then I'm going for the actual problem. This is very important as a physicist, that you must have a third eye to guess the solution. So this is what tells me that this has to be constant, therefore this must have this structure and this must be an invariant. So you can show then that the states can be specified as these, because you can specify the states also like this, but instead I am calling it nx, where n is the total. So where n is nx plus 1 plus 1. So instead I can label it like that. It's just a convenient choice. And you can show that there are two linear operators which commutes with the Hamiltonian. So these two, and one of them you can also check what do they do actually to the states. So it turns out one of them does this, one of you takes you to the down in this way, and it does the other way. Other thing does this. So you can formulate the problem in terms of that, and you can also show that H is 1. So work out this also. So this is an homework. I already wrote try, but I'm also writing. This is exactly what you have done in 1D. Just repeat this structure. So construct this structure and see that these S are good quantum numbers. In other words, by good quantum number, okay, I have not used yet what the word good quantum number, but let me just say S are operators which commute with the Hamiltonian, and that you know because of the fact that it keeps them in the same energy. So the eigenvalues are same, it means, right? So that means they must be commuting. So sorry, eigenvectors are the same, so they must be commuting. So then from there I can construct these S structures, and I can show that they are commuting with the Hamiltonian, but they don't commute with each other because they are two different objects. So try to do this problem, you will get some insight. This is just for you to build up some idea about how these kind of things work. And we will use this, we will do this in details for a three-dimensional hydrogen atom problem. That's why I don't want to do it in 2-3 different cases. I'll just do one cases, but the other things you can work out very easily by yourself. Okay, then there is another problem which you can do it very simply. Again, I will do it in details for hydrogen atom, but just to understand this, these are not different problems. These are basically same structure, same pattern, just done again and again in different context. So this is 3D SHO. So what is this? So this 3D SHO is PR omega square y square plus z square H So if you go to the radial coordinate, because this is now this is a spherical symmetry. So if I plot it, it is something like this. So x, this is y, and this is z. And this object is basically the surface of the sphere. So this problem has a spherical symmetry. So it makes sense to go to the spherical coordinate. So go to the spherical coordinate, this problem, this Hamiltonian becomes like this. And you will see that there are 3 angular momentum you can define. Earlier you had only one angular momentum, which is Lz, because the problem was symmetric with respect to z axis only. Now it is symmetric with respect to both x, y, and z axis. Then the Noether theorem tells you then there must be 3 angular momentum. This is xpy minus ypx and so on. No, sorry, x should be ypz minus zpy and so on. So then you should be able to show and so on. And so on, this kind of structure. Can you see my screen? Yeah, I think I accidentally unshared my screen. Okay, so you will get this, and you will be able to find another object called L square, which is the total angular momentum, which is nothing but Lx square, Ly square, Lz square, which satisfy this, which actually satisfy the same with all of them, Lx, Ly, Lz. So try to see this. So all these things I'm telling you just to play and get your hands dirty, like just to get used to the calculation and all that. You will learn all these things very rigorously next month from a very sophisticated point of view using symmetry operations. Okay, but I'm just giving you a prelude that these structures are very obvious, very immediately visible from the structure of your problem. So psi r theta phi in r phi in theta phi. So just stretch this problem in 3D and try to work out this part. Okay? This is a little non-trivial exercise, but if you have internalized the ladder operator business in harmonic oscillator, it's not hard. Any of this problem can be done in these two ways. One is this algebraic way, another is functional way. And all of them should manifest the same structure or the same symmetry. Okay. This problem has this LZ and all. So that is why this one also has this kind of S1 and S2. And everywhere you are exploiting this fact that there are two mutually commuting operators. So is everything clear so far? Then I'll switch gear and talk about a little bit about some fundamental ideas and some interpretations issue of Schrodinger equation. Do you think you can handle this algebra? You can do this algebra. The parts which I skipped especially. Are you following at least? Are you following that what is going on? What are the steps and why the structures must be there?
Yes.
Okay, good. How about someone else?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So these parts are actually done in great detail in the book. You can just pick up any book and read it up from there, or it's just several pages of algebra and calculus. I don't want to do all this algebra. It's like really a waste of time to do it in class because it's much better done than watched. Okay. So it's all you have to do is just go, for example, going from this step to this step. This is like a small one-line algebra, and then trying to show that if this is the, just check that if this two is like at this common eigenvalue and all. But what I'm trying to argue that even without actually doing the calculation, you can guess that this must be there. Okay? And that is coming from the physical intuition of the problem. That part you must understand as a physicist. The calculation any school kid can do, who learn calculus, they can do. Okay. Okay, so let's now go to some interpretations. So this part actually I wanted to finish before the break, but let me do it anyway, at least today, then such that I can go and discuss the details of this problem in 3D from next class. So this is actually again going back to the basics of earlier thing of the interpretation of probability and all. And it might appear for you, this discussion might appear a little simple for you, the structure of the problem now, of the quantum mechanics now. But historically, when Schrodinger first worked it out, he didn't know all this probabilistic interpretation. Okay, so for Schrodinger, the picture was, so he didn't think of matter wave as a probabilistic wave. He thought about it's like a particle that is spread out. If particles spread out or smeared out. But then why did he approach this wave equation? So it turns out that they needed this. Of course, the evident, you might need a wave structure that was already evident. And the structure was, as I said, the structure was already there in the classical mechanics in terms of the Hamilton-Jacobi formalism, which you, so did you learn Hamilton-Jacobi in classical mechanics? Any comment? Yes, no, you never heard it, or you heard it but not done it. What is the state of this? You didn't do it? Okay, then let me just tell you that this exists. So Hamilton and Jacobi is a idea, is a philosophy that if you get ray optics, geometrical optics from wave optics, then why can't you get the particle trajectory from some kind of underlying wave trajectory? That is the philosophy behind that. So that was worked out by these mathematicians in 18th century, and that led to this Hamilton-Jacobi structure. Of course, nobody knew what kind of wave it is. They just knew that, okay, if let's assume that you can get particle trajectory from some wave structure, just like you get physical geometrical optics from wave optics. And you know that in geometrical optics, the optical path minimizes the time that takes to travel from one point to other. That's the Fermat principle. But equivalent principle here is action. Okay? Action is some object of inverse dimension of time. So when you do that, you get a wave equation which has a first derivative in time, like Schrodinger equation. The Hamilton-Jacobi equation has this first derivative in time and second derivative in space. So Schrodinger basically borrowed that idea and worked out his equations. I mean, Schrodinger equation is partly, it's of course a brilliant work, but it was heavily inspired by those ideas. But it was not clear at that point that what kind of wave are they talking of. So they thought it might be, at Schrodinger didn't think of this probability wave structure. He thought that the particle is some spread out object. It's not a point object anymore. But then Born, it happened like almost around the same time, 1925-26. So Born realized this picture is not compatible with scattering experiments, because you are detecting a whole particle, right? You are not, it's not like just water wave kind of scenario. It's not like water wave, even though they were tempted to think it like that. So it involves that you are detecting a whole particle at a time. So it's not like the particle is spread out over various space. So Schrodinger's approach was, this thing is how much of the particle is at xt. And that was clearly not a correct way, because it was not giving you the scattering experiment interpretation. So then Max Born was the person who realized that it is, so he asked the question that it tells you what is the probability that, probability is of course not this, probability is this, that the particle is at xt when measured. Okay. So this is also another example for you to understand that the development in science doesn't happen in a linear fashion. The person who derived the most profound equation didn't realize what is it. Someone else did. Okay, that happens. But he was correct that the equation was correct. And we'll see in a moment that why this two picture is consistent and how a different way of thinking emerges out of that. Okay. So Born said, since it's a probability, that is the particle is at xt, so then the total must be 1, because then the particle must be somewhere, because particle cannot vanish or cannot be created, at least within this picture. When you learn QFT, you will learn a different definition of particle, but let's not get into that. Let's get into how you know particle as it is. So particle must be somewhere, right? So that was Born's idea. So if it has to be somewhere, then it must be satisfying this over the whole space. Okay? And then he interpreted that the probability of detection is psi xt mod square dx. Now, if this is true, then it led to something called an equation of continuity. So the idea is that the particle is conserved, which means the particle must be somewhere, it cannot vanish. So that tell you that the d and dt is a conserved quantity, it's 0 if n is constant. And Schrodinger equation must agree to that. So that was the test he posed for Schrodinger equation, because otherwise this interpretation is not valid. Okay? And if you try to think it in the way Schrodinger is thinking, then it is not, say, making sense to describe scattering. Okay, so that was the line of thought behind this. So then if you try to see what Schrodinger equation tells you corresponding to this, then let me write it down. So if I rewrite it as psi star xt psi xt 3x, then it is Now we know that Schrodinger equation is basically I h bar del psi del t h psi. Okay. Now if I use it here and here, I will get the following: psi star xt minus I by h bar h psi xt Okay. So then that gives me, so this, if this both sides have to match, then the integrands must match, and that gives me a local conservation law and a definition which we call as current. So we'll see in a moment. So I'm just writing this thing. Oops, I went to the end. This is a long page. I should make a PDF and give it to you. Psi star xt. So at this point, I'm just using the fact that h is minus h cut square by 2m grad square plus bx, some generic form. So if I use this here and here, I'll get this double derivative, and I can split the double derivative in terms of this. Grad psi xt minus psi xt grad psi star xt. Okay. So this thing, is it time? Yeah, just 2 minutes. Yeah. This thing is the local probability density. So I can rewrite this equation as but J is the current. Now, have you seen this equation somewhere else? So this is current or flux. So have you seen this equation somewhere else?
Electrodynamics.
Very good. That's
This is
exactly
continuity.
right. This is the continuity. So you land on this continuity equation, and that is consistent with what you started with. So Schrodinger equation is consistent with the fact that the probability must be conserved, total probability, and it gives you a local version of that. Okay? You eventually get a local version of that, and that tells you basically, and then you are able to define something called a probability current. Okay? So you can think this probability current is like a charge fluid, but always remember that what this probability is, it's everything is like make you tempted to think as if it's a smeared object. No, it's a prediction, it's a prescription of what you get when you measure. Yet it has this kind of a structure. Okay. So you get minus grad dot j. So if I write this form, you get the Gauss law of this. So this is basically your Gauss law. So you know the Gauss law form. It just tells you if I have a particle source, then if I enclose a surface, then the total current out of that, if I compute that over the surface area, it must be the total charge inside. Okay? And if there is no such charge, then it's either no current or the current must pass through, like pierce through this thing. So basically it tells you this interpretation. Any change in charge. So let's say I have a volume. So let's call this thing some volume V. So this is the surface that's enclosed the volume V. What is the symbol for that? Some round symbol is there. Any change in charge in volume V. So now I'm writing the electrodynamics language. Is accounted by the flow of charge over it. So that is basically, it says charge is neither created or destroyed. Now the equivalence, it's the same thing. It's a global conservation. Probability 1 of finding the particle somewhere in the universe. Okay. Now let me give a very peculiar example for that. I may not have time to complete the example, but the example is very simple and you can see it very clearly from here. So are you familiar with an example where the charge is constant, the local charge is constant, yet the current is not constant? Are you familiar with an example like that in electrodynamics? Did you do this problem of a rotating disk of uniform velocity at uniform charge distribution? Do you know that this problem will have a non-zero current because it's a rotating object, but if you take a local point, the charge is constant there. Even if you have not solved it, can you intuitively see that why it must be the case? What? Yes, no, maybe, don't know, totally don't understand. Something must be there, right? It's a ED problem, by the way. I'm not talking about quantum mechanics. Are you familiar
So
with this?
wherever that continuity equation is followed, the local rho will be constant, right? And J need not be 0.
Yeah, but it tells you, no, that is, so the global rho is constant, but the local rho can be this, right? Otherwise, how do you have current? You need a charge changing somewhere, right?
So rho at that point will not change, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, but I'm trying to ask you another example where the rho, so this example is more common to you, right? That the local rho is not a constant, and therefore the J is not equal to 0. Okay? This is a common example. This is the kind of example you do all the time. But this example is not so common, that the rho is not changing anywhere. It's steady state, right? It has no functional dependence on time, but yet there is a current. And the example is uniform disk rotating at a uniform velocity with uniform disk means uniform density of charge. Do you understand that why it must be the case?
Yeah.
Okay. Now show that, and then I'll give another example next class, that if the stationary state, a bound state, then J is 0 and rho is also 0. Or rho is constant at least. But if it's non-bound state, then the J is not equal to 0, yet the rho is constant. And you will see there that del dot J, but the divergence must vanish, otherwise it will not satisfy the continuity, which means it must satisfy this. This is just to make an analogy with the electrodynamics. So you can check this problem 1.17 in Griffiths, which does the same in 1D. Now another problem I want you to try, and I'll discuss it in the next class because it has some important thing. And we already discussed it in one form or the other. That is particle on a ring. We already discussed this. Now show what is the rho and what is the J for this problem. Solve this problem, which means the energy is given by Lz square by 2I, right? If particle is on a ring, this is the energy, where I is the moment of inertia and Lz is your angular momentum operator. Now take this problem, solve this problem in this, find that they are common eigenbases and etc., and show that it must satisfy this. Okay, and then we can identify this problem with the rotating disk problem. Is everything clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hope it is clear to all. So that is all for today. See you then. There is some office hour discussion with the IPHDs, right? Or the today's one is common to all. Okay, let me move to the office because now this place will be occupied, and take the discussion in the office. Just stay if you want to have the office hour discussion. আমার ক্লাসের শেষে অফিস আওয়ার থাকে সেটা এখন Okay. So is it a office hour with IPHDs, or I guess today's is IPHDs, right? But we anyway talked yesterday. But let's have some question answers if you want to discuss something. I mean, anyone can ask, but it's not that only IPHDs can ask. But let's have it. Okay, tell me. Okay, no questions? Okay, if none, then you don't need to sit. Is everything clear from today's lecture?
Sir, I have to go one more time.
Sorry, what?
I mean, I have to